else will break your heart. I'm never gonna hold you back. I'm always gonna have your back. So try to remember that. I hope you're happy. I hope you're good.
Sara, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I'm very excited. You are on a journey that I relate a lot to, and it's very exciting. You're like blossoming like a little flower. So for those who don't know you, can you give us a little introduction, please?
Sure. So my name is Sara Martin. Many know me as Sara Madkour. So as I kind of blow my life up here, I'm also having that identity crisis. So going back to my maiden name. So I'll introduce myself as Sara Martin. And I have worked in corporate America for about 25 years. And that's where I met Bobby at Price Chopper. And I worked there for about 17 years. And probably 8 or 9 years ago, I really got on this journey, starting with yoga. That really just kind of started opening me up and getting me on a journey that has helped me give up a lot of addictive behaviors, including alcohol, tobacco, food stuff. I always just shopping. I always joke like you name it, I've had it, right? Minus probably the gambling, but I do understand the gambling. So, those behaviors are all coming from the same place. So just really being on a healing journey, for these last 8 to 10 years. And as that progressed, the corporate environment that we were in, very old school, very patriarchal, what I found to be oppressive, really started feeling not good. So, done some coaching for healing childhood trauma with my first spiritual teacher for a couple of years. And I'm just so excited to be breaking out on my own here, bringing some of that. I have that certification. I have a certification under Gabby Bernstein, and I have a certification under Danielle Laporte for heart-centered work. Someone who really helped support me during 2020, during COVID, during all this uncertainty. So a lot of tools in the toolbox that I just really want to share with others.
I love that you are breaking out and starting to share this. I'm getting confused because of my journey. I don't know if people know what we're talking about, or like everybody in my circle now knows what yoga and spirituality and who Gabby Bernstein is and all these things. So I kind of started taking it for granted. And it was my recovery. It sounds like you're the opposite of me. My recovery led me to the spiritual work. And it sounds like your spiritual work led you to giving up the addictions and stuff. And I actually give it credit for removing my alcohol. But can you tell me, like, if you can remember back, like what excited you about yoga, or like you're an amazing meditation coach. I don't know is that the right word? But yeah. I love doing your meditations, and like, you seem to have a gift. Did you know you had a gift right away?
No.
Or like, what did that look like?
No, it looked like a hot mess. It looked like handing my kids off to my mother being like, I need to go to yoga. Like, yes. So it looks like a need, that, I hit, oh gosh, so my kids were probably 8 and 10, and they're now headed to 17 and 19. So it felt like a little bit of desperation, right? So I feel like so many of us were sold this bag of goods about the American dream, right? You go out, you work so hard, you get the right house, you get the right job, you get the right partner, you do the things. And then I don't know about anybody else, but I was like, oh, okay. But it was supposed to fill you up, right? But I still felt so empty. So, my job was very stressful. It was just a lot. I just felt like I didn't have time. So I found myself in a yoga room at the YMCA, and with a teacher who really talked about being a hot mess, you know, and I found myself judging her so hard. I was like, she's going to teach the class, you know, right? Because we've also been taught that teachers have to have it all together. Right.
Yes.
But the way she was able to get to me was, oh my God, you know, I have that too. Me too. I struggle with that too. Right. So when we start to unpack the stuff, that's when it's like, okay, permission to be fully oneself, hot mess and all. So that's really, I think, what got me feeling like, okay, this is where I belong. Not with everyone pretending everything's okay, but with the people that are like, here's my mess. What's your mess look like? You know?
I love that. You said a couple things, and I'm going to point this out since we go back and forth about my business boyfriend a lot. But when you talk about having the house, the kids, the typical American dream, right? Like that's what he teaches us, to strive beyond that, for that fulfillment and that purpose. So I love that you said that. And then the hot mess part, I don't even remember who I was talking to, because I get to talk to so many beautiful people, but they were saying that as leaders, as coaches, as people who are getting watched, the people who are just starting to discover us, or the things we talk about, or the messages we carry, they want to hear it from people who've walked through those problems, those situations, those things, and got to the other side. It means a whole lot more than someone who had a perfect life and life is good, and I'm going to tell you how to have a perfect life too. It doesn't really work that way. It's about the journey, and it's about the recovery, and it's about the learning, at least in my opinion. What do you think?
Totally. And you're giving me a flashback. So my first alcohol counselor, right? I started drinking and doing drugs when I was like 14 years old. So my first alcohol counselor I got to interact with at like, I don't even think I was 21 yet. So, and she had never drank alcohol.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I'm an angry young kid as it is. And like, you're going to help me. All that did was ramp up my anger more. There was no way she was helping me. She hadn't walked in my shoes, and, you know, I was only 21, but she hadn't walked in my shoes. So absolutely. That's why I say, you know, why I am able to, you know, help people, and like, not much shocks me. You know, and I think, you know, for people to be held with their stuff that so many of us are so busy hiding, using so much energy to tamp down the stuff that, you know, we're taught not to show the world. You know, so yeah, I totally agree. I've walked through the fire and gotten on the other side, and I'm still walking through the fire, right? It's just, you know, we treat it as weather. It just, you know, the things that come, we're always just peeling layers. But I do agree that, what makes me good at what I do is because I've been through most addictions, you know, some trauma and those kinds of things. So for sure, I agree.
One of the things that I appreciate about you so much is not only that I learn things, right, but you're so candid and vulnerable. Like the way that you show up, whether it's in yoga or the Zoom classes, or even meditation, when we're doing it at work, right? Like you were breaking through a major barrier there and getting people, you know, 8, 10, 15 people to join in a circle once a week. And it's funny, I think you called this out, like, I'm not going to call it woo-woo anymore, because it's not woo-woo, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to have permission or make excuses to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And that's part of the journey too, is coming to that realization and that confidence about that. It's not woo-woo, it's reality, or it's my reality, it's your reality. So can you talk a little bit about all that service? Like what prompted you to start meditation there? Or what prompted you to start a group on Saturday mornings? You know, you weren't getting paid for any of these things, right? Like you just show up and give. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, a little twofold, I suppose. So my sobriety really prompted leading meditation for the first time, and in this yoga room I was in, right? So this teacher of mine now does not live here, but there was a community building around this person, and they would have some gatherings, and I don't know, some had, and so again, the yoga helped me become sober. So I just want to give a little background, so I'd go to yoga was like Fridays and Sunday mornings, a Friday night, Sunday mornings. A lot of times I was going in hungover. Right. And it was like, oh, so like when you're in yoga and it's hot yoga, right. Or warm, you know what I mean? So you could feel your hangover so much that it was like, oh, and at the same time, I was starting to feel good. So, that's where it started peeling it away. So it took me a few times that I would quit drinking for a few months and I'd go back and then whatever. But I've had these same friends that we bonded over drinking and eating and excess. And I would still show up sober, at dinners or whatever. And I'm like, this doesn't, and I had heart connections with people, right? When we're talking about the deep things and when we talk about the things you and I talk about. So when I would show up to the dinners and no one's listening, everyone's just, starting not to feel good. So I was pretty isolated. The first year or two of not drinking, I was pretty isolated. And I'm like, this doesn't feel good either, right? This doesn't feel, where's my community? Where's my, how do you make friends at 40? Like what? And so I just decided I'm going to have this meditation. And I don't know if it was in the yoga room. I remember it was 4 or 5 people that came to the house the first time. I was more nervous than my wedding because it felt strange to me because I didn't know what we were doing. So that's how it started. And then I think it just kept evolving from there. And certainly, doing the coaching with my spiritual teacher got me out of my comfort zone so many times. Well, and I started teaching yoga, right? I went and got my teacher training. So getting up in front of people started becoming more natural. And I am an extra, I always say I'm an introverted extrovert because it does take some energy for me to be around people, but I am a natural extrovert. I am a natural teacher. Like it's in my lineage. It's in my mother was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher, so it's natural for me. And that's how I connect. Like I would much rather be in a meditation with people and connecting our hearts than talking about the weather. Like that's just who I am. And, it helps me as much as it helps other people. So it is a little selfish. But yeah, that's really, and listening, right. And listening and listening to guided intuition of like, when I'm in my own meditation, I can hear certain things of like, okay, hold this meeting, hold this, whatever it is. So
you brought up a good point about the evolution of sobriety and the people we hang out with. Again, another hot topic. And I love that you called out, and maybe I'm just repeating kind of what you say, but once you get with, I hate the cliche phase, but like-minded people, right? You start attracting them. The conversations look very different than a Friday night sipping wine kind of conversation.
yeah.
And it's, I don't know if you experienced this, but even our relationship, right? We don't have to talk every week, but when we talk, it could go crazy deep really fast. And like the relationships are more meaningful, I think, living in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I cherish. I cherish it. And, I think my work right now is accepting people for exactly who they are, right? Because we still have to function outside in the world where people, want to talk about the weather, and it's like, okay, well, don't, because for sometimes I'm like, I was so resistant. Like if it wasn't deep, if we weren't talking about the meaning of life, I wasn't interested, so I'm, now it's like, okay, stop being so, resistant to small talk or whatever. It's part of it too. But yeah, I really enjoy, the deeper conversations and, people that are wanting to do the healing work and are aware of, our kind of inner child, or that our brains were formed from age 0 to 10. And sometimes your 7-year-old's driving the bus, and that we get to inspect that together of like, okay, what'd your 7-year-old do today? And be real honest about it,
Exactly. So this has led you to leaving corporate America, creating your own programs. And as you were talking about your different certifications, what was going through my head was, this is what makes us so unique as awesome badasses, right? Because you went through these coaches and this experience, and I went through different coaches and this experience. And even though it's two totally different paths, the ideas conceptually are pretty similar. But now there's the Sara program, right? Like all the nuggets and all the things that you've learned, all the things you processed, all your experiences. Now you're pouring that out into your programs. And because this is evergreen, so somebody might hear this from 5 years from now. I don't want to get into the weeds of it, but you just launched a few programs. Can you talk maybe a little bit about your objectives in the programs, or what the result is that the client would get, or what that looks like for someone that signs up to work for you, with you?
Yeah. So, working strongly with law of attraction, right? In its simplest form is that everything is energy, right? And like energy attracts like energy. So, when I am in gratitude and I have a higher vibration and I feel really good, I attract more things that are high vibrational and good. When I am in fear all the time, right, which is so easy to do right now. I mean, I don't think there's any time in the world we've ever been in more fear. This is why I don't ingest the news like on repeat on the TV or whatever. But we can be attracting those kinds of things. So I really work with that to break it down and educate folks on the power of our mind. Really using yoga, breath work, different techniques to affect the mental, physical, energetic, and emotional body, right? So really in the beginning, usually I have a 6-week program right now. And it's just, I did hit 40 and I rang all the bells and I feel dull, right? Taking my story of like, okay, I did all the things that I was told was going to fill me up and I feel empty. So what's that about? Right. And we start excavating that a little bit. And, really one of the most basic things, again, like I said, changing the thoughts to change the emotions, right? And I say that is usually about 80% of the time that we just have these thoughts on repeat, and that we start reconditioning the mind to question like, well, is that true? Is that true? Or is that something that was wired into me? Is that my mom's voice? It was wired into me when I was 5. So we start to kind of pull that out. And then the other 20, maybe 30%, depending on your upbringing, I think we've all heard the term, the issues are in your tissues, or if you're hysterical, it's historical, that we've all had, again, a word that may be overused, but we've all had some kind of trauma in our upbringing, right? And we say trauma with a big T, which, can be abuse, can be, the bigger things that really, really affect us, losing a loved one, those kinds of things. But there's trauma with a little t, that can get locked in that, when I was, in first grade, I raised my hand, I gave the answer and it was wrong and the whole class laughed at me. Right. And so we lock that stuff in. It's like, I no longer speak up. Right. So these things, so it's teasing out these things that are holding people back. So, it's right now it's a 6-week course. You get curriculum. We have a weekly meeting, which is what I really love too, because I believe one of my favorite terms is that we are all just walking each other home. And, I can get emotional. I have chills right now because Bobby, you're one of those people, right, that I got to watch, and that gave me the encouragement to leave the corporate job and to do these things. And we are holding hands here. And when I have the groups, mostly I just get out of the way, and the people gather, have the messages for each other, if that makes sense. Like it's, we're all there walking each other home, because there's so much wisdom when people gather together. So I love the group work a whole lot.
I agree. That's why I'm holding this retreat the way I'm holding it in the fall, is because the connection of the people in the breakout rooms and all the things that are different, then I don't know. it's much better than being taught
Yeah.
that to be communicating with.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then there's, you know, some one-on-one sessions that we really tease out. Okay. What are those limiting beliefs that, you know, you may or may not, most of the time, not aware of. And we go into the body, because what happens is, you know, with this trauma, these things get stuck. Like I said, you know, they literally in our bodies, right? It causes dis-ease, right? And we're not in a society right now, although growing and growing and growing, where we proactively treat this stuff, right? We're a reactive, you know, in our medical system right now, but more and more, everyone's realizing how much this contraction, right? This holding so much stress produces cortisol and makes us physically sick. So that's what I love about it, is like, okay, like I always joke, I'm like, I spent the first year of meditation just trying to like get my shoulders away from my ears, you know, because and like every time I'm like, oh, they're back. Because we hold, like every time something happens, we hold it. Right. Whereas like, if you look at a dog, they almost get hit by a car, they're shaking it off. Right. And it really, we wouldn't need any of this if we just acted like dogs, I think. So
Look it off. I like that. I might have to be doing that from now on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never heard the two terms you used before, but I'm very grateful for them. So the issues are in the tissues, and hysterical is historical. And I just want to call that out because it's something that's consistent. I interview a lot of experts like you that have been doing the studying, that have been understanding in different ways. And whether it's a coach or a psychiatrist or someone who's, you know, whatever those things are, there's some consistency about that trauma. And I am 100% convinced that every addiction is caused because of that trauma. Like that's where I landed. Now, again, I'm not a scientist. I didn't, you know, write my hypothesis out, but that's what is very clearly showing up for me. So helping people process that, to me, like I'm grateful for people like you, because not everybody's journey, like not everybody discovers this through addiction. Like I'm grateful to gambling and drinking and those kinds of things because it led me to these facts. But I'm always wondering, like, what about the normal people? How do they find yoga? How do they find spirituality? How do they discover law of attraction? Like, is it all just from The Secret on Netflix? Like, how are people figuring this out? So that's why I love sharing people like you, but does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah. And it's interesting because, and I struggle a little bit again with this system because it's antiquated. And I have nothing against the organized groups. No, I'm going to steer away from naming them, but I love it. I know it has a place with step work and all of it, but sometimes there's so much fear there, right? Whereas, you know, the work that I like to do, that I want to do, I think is, you know, it's total love and acceptance of all of us, of the hot mess part, of the part that wants to go drink my face of the part that wants to go gamble, of the, you know, because it's the right. This is the other cliche saying, what we resist persists. So if I'm tamping that down all the time, you know, it gets louder, right? Anyone who's dieted, this is another thing I don't do anymore, is diet or pull things off the table, because that's another addiction I have. If I remove, you know, chocolate, all I can think about is chocolate, right? So it's this allowing the urges to come and noticing and being like, oh, I see you. And I realize you're really exhausted. You've been around a ton of people. Like you're so tired and depleted, like realizing what the triggers are for you, and that I need to go take a bath and go to bed early, you know, or do some yoga and, you know, that kind of thing. So yes, and yes, so many of us are reaching outside of ourselves for a peace that can be found in here, you know, which is a practice, trust me. And that sometimes I can find it, you know, better than other days. You know, sometimes my meditation is just watching the thought loop, like, oh, she's busy today, you know, but I'm giving it space instead of being like running from it. Right. So the addictions are, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to look at, you know, all the stuff that, you know, happened in my upbringing, or all of these, you know, so-called flaws, right? Because if we turn the TV on, you know, we're supposed to be happy, you know, 100% of the time. And that's not true. That's not true, or we wouldn't have the full range of emotions. Right. And one of my favorite coaches, this is what I love, 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 love. And, you know, one of my friends, like, this changed my world of, we're not striving to be happy. Like, I don't want to be happy. I want to be alive. I'm going for aliveness, not happiness, because happiness is, again, if you get it 50% of the time, great. You're doing awesome. But that's not what we're sold. We're supposed to be like this all the time.
Yeah. You bring up another point that relates to addiction with this aliveness. The distinction that I felt when you just said that was, you could be happy and not be alive, feeling, enjoying it. Just like if there was bad emotions, that you aren't happy, maybe you're grieving a loss or whatever, you need to process those things. You need to be alive in those emotions so that you're not putting more issues in your tissues, right?
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
So
exactly.
I like that. I wrote down, you had said something earlier, physical, mental, I don't know if you said spiritual, but you had said those different places to create harmony and learn about and stuff, which triggered me remembering that you have a connection with Ayurveda, and we didn't talk about that. So can you share like your exposure to that and like how that came into your life? Because I recently have been investigating it. So I'm curious.
Yeah.
This is the selfish question.
You know, I love it. I love it. I love it because it changed my world. So this first spiritual teacher of mine, the yoga teacher who I did my yoga teacher training with, was part of her curriculum and trained in Ayurveda. So, which is the sister science for yoga that's been around for thousands of years. And like, in a nutshell, it just talks about, you know, our makeup of that we all have some elements, right? That we are really earth elements, right? We're made up of the same atoms and energy that the earth is, and that the air is, and that fire is, right? So that we all have some combination of what the terms are: kapha, which is earth, pitta, which is fire, and vata, which is air. And again, we tend towards usually one of those, or a good mix, right? So it was really, really interesting. This helped me with my weight loss journey too. So this was like my law of attraction I was focused on my food stuff, you know, of course, external stuff. We're all being sold, we got to look a certain way. Well, I was sold, you know, I struggled with that my whole life. And during my yoga teacher training, and my teacher kept calling me kapha, which is earth, right? Which is a little heavier, a little thicker, a little slower, right? All the things that are negative in our society, right? So I'll come back to that piece of things and how it helped me. But pitta, right? Very celebrated. Pitta is fire. Pitta is energy, which I have a lot of that as well. So do you, Bobby. I'm always like, there's Bobby's fire. And this is why it helps, because when you can see it in other people, we don't take things as personally. Like, oh, she just fired up today. That wasn't personal, you know? So again, it's results driven. It's more muscular bodies. What else about Pitta? Results driven. And, you know, we go into some imbalances too, but I won't take us, it's hard for me. I could riff on this for hours and hours, and then Vata, which is, this helps me a lot because I don't have a ton of this. So Vata is air, and it's usually your longer, lankier people, less meat on their bones, creative, artistic, kind of living up here, right? You think about air and they're kind of blowing around. So it's like the people that are always late, you know, yeah, right. And this is where it helps you be more tolerant. Like, I can expect that this person's going to be 10 minutes late because I have the data. And it's not on purpose. She just got distracted. And of course there's all these, other benefits to these things too. But the kapha, I was in denial. I was in total denial about being earthy, and my teacher didn't talk about it. She didn't have a lot of kapha. So she was pitta vata. So she didn't, there was times where, the kapha's home eating potato chips on the couch. Like there was some negative stuff there too, where I wouldn't want to own it. Long story short, during my teacher training, and I was 30 pounds heavier, and we assessed each other. And I'm like, I was like, I might as well have been in a sorority where they circled my fat or whatever. Like, I didn't want to hear any of it. I was in total denial. I'm like, why are they calling me kapha? I had like the opposite of like body dysmorphia. I didn't even know I was as heavy as I was, whatever. But what happened is there was these beautiful earthy women in the training where I could be like, because earth is loving and voluptuous and loyal and caring and giving. Like that's the parts of it where I was able to celebrate it. And this makes me want to cry and accept it. Right. And this is the work that I love, is again, accepting all of that, within the 6 months that 30 pounds was gone because I accepted that part of me. So that's why I love the work, is like, you see all these miracles, like once we do dig in and we do like why, and there were so many reasons I was rejecting it. And I had to do the work, and, I've been able to kind of, maintain a body weight that I'm happy with, but it's also not that important to me anymore either. So long story to a quick question.
No, I love it. I love it because I'm trying to understand the dynamics, and the stuff that I'm studying and the podcasts that I'm listening to. I'm hearing a lot of the times of day and the choices we make. And like, really at the end of the day, it comes all about listening to your body. And I've heard people say that, but I don't know how to do that yet. Or
okay.
I'm more like, that's what part of my goals for 2022 is to have the intuition and to let my body guide me, essentially.
Yeah. Beautiful. And that's this work. And it's also seasonal, right? It's like, it's that, we used to live with the earth, right? Before we were in our, little, whatever, we were with the earth. So we're built to evolve with that, so that in winter we're contracting and we're going inward. Spring we start coming alive again. Summer is that more pitta season where you're going. So there's so much to it, Bobby. There's a lot, but I think I have like Ayurveda's for dummies or something like that. So it's she's a great teacher, so we can talk more about that too. But I keep it very surface. This is one thing I've learned about myself, is that I get the concept enough that it helps me. And if I go too far, I'll obsess about things. So I keep it kind of surface, even in my teaching.
I agree with that. That's another strategy evolving for me too. I want to be able to communicate to the people that need to hear it from me that there's all these options, and then let people dig, and figure it out for themselves. But again, I think of it through the lens of, if I didn't end up probably in rehab, honestly, I don't know that I would have meditated ever. Like all the things in my recovery journey are what led me to just kind of having an open mind and being able to accept some of the woo-woo things. So I love that. Is there anything that I am forgetting to ask you, or that you might have wanted to talk about? So again, our two audiences are entrepreneurs, and I try to relate business to my recovery and the journey as a startup. And then, my gambling addicts are people impacted by, I hate calling people addicts. I can call myself an addict, but that was bad choice of words. People impacted by gambling addiction or other addictions. So is there any other nuggets that you want to share? Because I know you have so much wisdom in you that.
Oh, you're so sweet. Oh my goodness. Gosh, I just really, like I said, I think the work is really just loving all parts of ourselves. Like, when you talk about listening to the body, the things that for me, like kind of bubble up, right? I bit somebody's head off, or whatever. And And instead of reaching, well, they deserved it, or reaching for the reasons and the judgments, being like, oh, what's going on with me? Right. That real introspection of, what do I need when I start acting out, or my urges are getting stronger? Really saying, okay, what do I need? Do I need to talk to somebody? Do I need to reach out? And really allowing for all of it, right? And being loving and compassionate, and talking to ourselves as we would a friend. Because I don't know about anybody else, but and we play with this a little bit too. So Eckhart Tolle in A New Earth talks about pain bodies. So we all have little flavors of these enemies, basically, that are like with us, right? And I like to have fun with it. I have little cartoon characters, but one of them is Judge Judy, right? And we all have that inner critic that is just, assessing and judging constantly. And it's like, it's like you learn to separate from that's not me. And like, you need to be quiet. I'm going to soften and breathe, and I'm going to be kind to myself. It sounds so simple, but we all know when we're on the fly and you got all sorts of things coming in, your mother's visiting or whatever, it takes some work. It takes some work. So what I would offer is that again, I know this might be evergreen, but for anybody who's listening right now, I do have another group coming up in April, this 6-week group that really dives into everything we're talking about and really helps you to understand some of the sensations, some of the limiting beliefs, and can help you with some practices so that they're not bubbling up as often or as much.
Wow. Again, when you talk, I hear different things. So one of the connections I just made was, in recovery, they tell us we aren't the addiction, right? Like, so I like you calling out the Judge Judy. It's the same thing. Our addictive, like one of my little taglines is change your attitude to gratitude, right? So that little addict, that is the one making you judgmental, making you a thief, or, a criminal, or all these things. Cause there's so many people that do some really horrible things. It's not that they're bad people. It's these little, now I love this perspective. So I'm picturing a bunch of little bad people running around, or good people running around. So thank you for that visual too.
Yeah. And there's so much and forgiveness is a piece of this too, right? Of like making peace with your former self too, right? So they're not driving the bus as well. And one other thing I would say that's been coming to my mind. I think the work of Russell Brand. He has a YouTube channel, and he talks about too. We talked about trauma and upbringing, and like just not wanting to be in your body, of why we reach for other things. But another really big piece is the isolation, the lack of connection. Right. So that's why I love the group work. That's why I love the meditation. That's why I love recovery groups. Like, I'm not dissing them. It's just, I feel like they need to evolve a little bit more. Because for me, especially for drugs and alcohol, like for me, like, I'm like, where else in the world, if you fall back, you have to totally start over again, like that it's wiped out. Like if I lost 20 pounds and then I go on a binge and I gain 3 pounds, well, I still lost 17 pounds. So I struggle a little that when and I know it serves a purpose, maybe in the beginning, but I feel like later it's like, I want that fear-based thing. I feel can be unsettling for me.
I wish I had one of those mind blown emojis right now. Never did I think of it from that perspective, like that black and white. Wow. I mean, we talk about like, you don't lose your clean time in the way of what you learned when you're not actively, participating, but I never thought about it as that perception in the structure is like, wow. Okay. That was huge.
So, and I just wonder if I don't know, like, I'm still finding the breadcrumbs of what my real work is. And I don't know if that's part of it, just because I've had too many experiences with people who they won't go back into the rooms because of the shame. And that's not good, So
yeah,
I hope I'm not going off too much in a place we shouldn't be.
No, you're fine. You're fine. And, because it's part of my mission to like, I'm totally a fan of Gamblers Anonymous. It's helped change my life, right?
Totally has a purpose.
It definitely does and did. And what I'm afraid of is the people who, let's say, won't go in the rooms, right, for shame or whatever, or maybe they just don't think it's them, or they're still caught in the stigma. I feel like my mission is just to show that there's other options, right? And maybe someday it'll lead them to GA, maybe it won't. At the end of the day, it's all the same. Let's
totally
look in the mirror. Let's take accountability for it, and let's do the work, to evolve and change instead of staying in the shit. Like, it's really, no matter what the program or title or thing is, it seems to all be the same if we look for the similarities, right?
Totally.
Okay, here's my final question, because we both throw around this term, and let's say the audience doesn't know what we mean by this. You said, I had to do the work. So if we have a rookie out there, well, what do you mean do the work? What does that look like for you, Sara? What is doing the work, or what could you advise people to do to start doing the work?
I think at its most basic level, it involves getting quiet and being still. And for anyone listening, like, I just notice, I mean, even after 8 or 10 years, there's a little baby part of me that's still resistant, right? Like, think about, like, that can be scary to people, right? That's why we stay in this doing. Again, even just doing and staying busy keeps us from feeling what's really going on, and feeling the feelings we have been taught to tamp down. So I think really giving room and space to what is really bubbling underneath, snapping at your kids, what's underneath, the behaviors that you're not pleased with, of not just justifying them, but saying, okay, what's really under here? Because it's usually some kind of fear, and going into, what am I scared of here? And how can I soften that? And sometimes, again, it's as easy as like, learning to soften your body. Let me soften here, and let me just inspect where's my fear in this situation. That's at its most basic core. I love writing. I'll start writing, and then like the writing is just writing itself. And it's like, okay, I didn't know that was there. So I think that's a really simple way to go in. I love the journal prompts of, I'm angry, I'm sad. My most recent one came out, I'm tired of this, I'm tired of that. And getting it out of the body. Just getting it out and giving it room and not being ashamed of it, because we all, have our struggles. And the more you start giving them air and bringing them into the light, they loosen up. It's the tamping down and the holding on where they just become these monsters,
So true. So true. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for being here. How do people find you?
So my website is soulsearch.com. So it's SOL, which is light in Spanish, dash search. So SOL-search.com is my website. So my events are there. And, my Facebook page, certainly, I'm pretty active on that as well, which is, just Sara Martin Madkour, which again, will probably get dropped soon, but, that's where I'm at.
I love it. It's like you have this new persona. I had a boss at that patriarchal place that when I moved to Kansas City, he said, well, you can reinvent yourself. And that's kind of what you get to do when you leave corporate America, or you make a big life change like what you did, making that shift. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for, getting the weed whacker out and getting the path cleared so I can see what it looks like. I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you. You've been a big advocate and supporter of mine, and I appreciate it.
I love you, Bobby.
I love you too, my Sara.